Here, at this specific panel of the Jerusalem room, and we just mentioned that this on-record discussion, it is filmed. Everybody can ask whatever they want, please, with no political questions, because we are not political people, and we will answer specific questions and professionalism. Second of all, this panel is partnered with the Jerusalem Ministry the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage. I mean, to say the full name. My name is Omri Attar. I'm representing ELNET. I'm the Chief of Operation in an organization that's promoting Israel across Europe. We have offices in 5 different places in Europe, alongside Germany and Berlin, France, Brussels, Warsaw, Madrid, and Rome. I'll be more than happy to elaborate, but this is not my panel, so please let me welcome my panel members here. First and foremost, Director General of the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage, Mr. Ichay. Ichay, I will just explain before Ran, I'm sorry. Everybody will have a couple of minutes to explain and describe exactly what they're doing, their position, about their work, and then we'll open for questions. I will ask you a few questions. Of course, we will open the questions from the audience, so feel free. And if you have any question, please write it down, and then we'll gather some, and then we'll answer as panelists. The first panel member here is former Ambassador Ichay, Director General of the Ministry. Second panel member is Professor Khoury, the Dean of Social Work School in the Hebrew University. Third one is Yamit Naftali, Head of Economic and International Research and a Senior Researcher at the Jerusalem Institute of Policy Research. Hani Alami, entrepreneur of the field of technology, especially in the field of internet, and the founder of Accelerator that we will hear much more very soon. Fourth member who I met is Netta Rozenfeld, Program Director at Elka Institute for Leadership, that will explain also about the joint venture together with the Joint and together with the Ministry. So please, the floor is yours. Feel free. We'll be happy to hear your thoughts.
Am I the first?
Yes.
So, well, my name is Ichay. I come from the Foreign Service, and in the last couple of years, I am lucky enough to be in office in the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage. And I understand that this panel deals with narrowing the gaps in Jerusalem, and there is a lot to narrow. Do I now present my things, or everybody
Please
will
present it, and then everybody will present after.
Okay. So I'll try to be brief and to leave some time for the others. Israel is sovereign in East Jerusalem for 50 years now, more than 50 years, 51 years. It is no secret that we concentrated in other things than narrowing gaps in Jerusalem, and I think it's about time that the government will recognize, and that's exactly what was done in the Jubilee year to the reunification of Jerusalem. The government decided to seriously take into account the situation in East Jerusalem, and we launched, the last day of Jerusalem, a few months ago, we launched a program of 2 billion shekels for 5 years, which is the first time the government has dedicated such a program and such a sum in this regard. And it comes of the very clear and very simple, I would say, state that being sovereign is being responsible. You can't be sovereign for someone without being responsible. And since we fully acknowledge the fact that we are sovereign in East Jerusalem, in all parts of Jerusalem, it means that we are also responsible. I have just heard, by the way, a few days ago during the weekend, that the European Union has condemned my country for demolishing a few buildings in Jerusalem on one hand, and on the other hand, condemning my country for planning to build in the new, not so new anymore, but in neighborhoods in Jerusalem, describing it as violation of international law. So I would state here what I have stated in many other places already, that Israel is sovereign in Jerusalem by the international law and not in contradiction to international law. The statement by the European Union and the condemnation by the European Union, and as well as others in the past, that sovereignty of Israel in Jerusalem is in contradiction to international law is false. This is not true. I will answer it later if I'm asked in this regard. This is something as clear as the sun rises every day in the east. So when we take it into account and when we take ourselves seriously as sovereigns in Jerusalem, it means that we have to take care of all population of the city. And since we know, and it's quite easy to locate the problems of the city, and mainly the problem that we're dealing with now, it means that we have decided to take care of that. As I said, it's the first time in 50 years that the government has decided to do that in such a scale, in such volume. And I believe we'll see the results in the next coming years. And I believe also that this is only the first step, first of many steps, aimed to really narrowing gaps in the city. And I will go into details if I'm asked later.
Thank you, Ran.
So I will speak shortly, and then you can ask me whatever. In here, I'm taking. Maybe I take from the government. It's better.
It's always better.
Yeah, it's always better. Yeah. You don't have money, so it's okay.
Non-profit organization.
Exactly. So my name is Mona Khoury-Kassabru. I'm professor at the Hebrew University. I'm the dean of the School of Social Work. Actually, I'm serving in this position only 2 months, and before that, I have been the advisor for the Hebrew University president for minority affairs, and mainly I still fulfill this position. As the main purpose of my other position, not as a dean, but as the advisor of the Hebrew University president, is to increase access for higher education for the Arab population. And another position that I fill at the university is I'm the head of the steering committee for the initiative called Israeli Hope, which initiative by the president of Israel, not the university president, Reuven Rivlin, which one of the main goals of this initiative is to make more like, we have one step of increasing access, and the other step is working together between the groups and making the campus more culturally sensitive and to acknowledge the cultures of different groups. So we have many work that we do together with the increasing access for Arab education, but we have also separate steps that we work for the Haredi society, like the ultra-Orthodox society, and the immigrants from Ethiopia and people who come from disadvantaged homes. So I work on all these, as you see, in addition to being a dean. So.
Hi, so as mentioned, I'm the head of economic research and international research at the Jerusalem Institute for Policy Research. And as our name, we are located in Jerusalem, which is the capital city of Israel, and most of our work is dedicated to designing better and more efficient policy. So we work with different municipalities and ministries, including the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage. And through our work, we help, we supply in-depth research based on independent data and relevant information for policymakers in different ministries in order to help them decide on the best course of action. We're also conducting research, evaluating research of existing policy plans which are already implemented in order to understand if we are achieving the results and the goals that different ministries set out for themselves. And if not, we help them understand how they can change the current policy measures in order to achieve a greater impact on the society. So among our research, we're working with the ultra-Orthodox population in Jerusalem, the Haredim population. We also work with our population in East Jerusalem, and a lot of our researchers is actually focused on trying to narrowing the gaps between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem. But as I mentioned, we are from the research side. We help to understand how the policy works and how we can increase the impact for policymakers like one here.
Thank you very much.
My name is Hani Alami, an entrepreneur from East Jerusalem, working the last few years trying to help the community in East Jerusalem to stay and to start their startup in the city. Founded an NGO called JEST, Jerusalem for Entrepreneurs, Society and Technology, trying to minimize the brain drain happening in the city and trying to keep those talented between us to start their business.
My name is Netta Rozenfeld. I live down south in Israel, next to the Gaza Strip, with my family, 2 lovely daughters, and work with Arab society now for the 8th year at JDC, under the Institute for Government and Leadership called Elka. Coming from the business sector, and falling in love with the social impact that is being possible by the work between the government and social society organizations.
Thank you very much. As you know, there's a very professional and political panel, so we have a lot of interesting things that we can elaborate together. The first question is for Ron. I will not ask you about international law now, because I know that you have a strong answer in it. I will be happy to elaborate in a little bit of time. But my first question to you is how the ministry works together with the Municipal Council of Jerusalem, because there's a few directions in Israel society that ask about how important this ministry. Well, we of course know and understand it, but I'll be happy if you can elaborate about the work that you do together with the Municipal Council of Jerusalem and with the city itself.
This question comes up every time and again when the status of the Ministry of Jerusalem is on the table, on the agenda, and it's quite clear. Not only there is no other Jerusalem in Israel, there is no other Jerusalem in the world. This is a unique city. I used to have this example from Great Britain. They have the Ministry for, or the Secretariat, how they call it, the Department for Northern Ireland. They have a special area, special territory that they take care of differently from other ministries. They separate it from other ministries. It is not exactly the same case, but it's the same sense. It's the same logic. The municipality of Jerusalem deals with daily life in Jerusalem, which is quite complicated as it is. The Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage tries to deal with the national level of Jerusalem, and trust me, there is a national level to Jerusalem, not to mention the international level of Jerusalem. And we try to adjust our efforts with these of the municipality, but sometimes you can tell the difference between the way the municipality sees things and how we see it differently. I won't go into details in this regard, but I can say that, for example, this special program for 5 years now for developing of East Jerusalem wouldn't have occurred if it was not for the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage, because the Ministry of Jerusalem is the level that can combine other ministries and the whole government and put these efforts together for one big program for a few years to come. If it was the municipality, it's like every year, you have to argue for another 100, 500 million shekels. This is not like, it's not narrowing the gaps. It's trying to hold things together and trying to survive the current year. We are not trying to survive the current year or the year to come or the next year. We're trying to plan for years to come. We try to see the ultimate goal of the city, if there is an ultimate goal for a city of 3,000-year-old. But that's what we are trying to do. We try to manage things in Jerusalem in the national level and above, if there is any. And we leave the municipality aspects, the daily life aspects to the municipality. And I think in the last few years we managed to do that.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to to explain sometimes for foreigners the relevance for this ministry, which is, of course, highly. So thank you for this. Next question actually is for Netta. We talked about the public sector and part of the public sector and the governmental center. Be happy to hear your thoughts regarding how to recruit other sectors, such as business sector and nonprofit sector, to the work together with the ministry or coexistence in Jerusalem.
I think in that regard,
Yes.
sorry.
Please.
Sorry. Okay now? Yeah? I think in that regard, the JDC brings the expertise of the mechanism and perception to the field. We started in our involvement in East Jerusalem by the program Leading Change that was prior to the government resolution that was taken in last May. Because philanthropists brought us to the table. Jewish people who live in Jerusalem, who looks at East Jerusalem as a national social issue and a leverage for better opportunities to their own kids as part of the whole Israeli society. So as being an NGO, the biggest NGO, the biggest Jewish NGO, I think, in the world, and the biggest social NGO in Israel, we're partly funded by philanthropists, and the new philanthropy is looking at social issues as something to get involved in, including Arab society in Israel. And East Jerusalem is becoming more and more of a social issue rather than a political one. So being a coalition of philanthropists that stands behind the JDC, we're managed to create a momentum of philanthropy that is looking very closely over to the last government resolution for East Jerusalem, and are very eager to get involved.
How about the business sector together with social investments such as impact investing that we learn, especially in Israel, which is very relevant for business people to be more involved in social issues?
Yeah.
Is this something that you see in your work?
I think the old perception was like social responsibility.
Of corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, what we called about, they talked about Ma'ala. The social responsibility attitude is the old way. Now we're working with businesses trying to get their own business added value for their intervention. We're talking about approximately 380,000 people in East Jerusalem with hardly any commercial or social services. This is a huge business opportunity. So, of course, we cannot do that alone because this has to be combined with the entrepreneurship field. It has to be combined with policy making field, the government, and create a supporting scene of business development in East Jerusalem, but the potential is huge.
Of course. Thank you very much. Just mentioning you pointed Hani, and the next question actually is for you. We'll be more than happy to hear your thoughts regarding how was it to initiate the accelerator, the famous accelerator that you initiated in East Jerusalem, and how it's combining with social mobility to East Jerusalem, and how it's connected East Jerusalem part to the border city of Jerusalem.
To start that idea, it wasn't easy.
Of course.
But since everything in Jerusalem, it's not easy. And when you are trying to push people to stay in the city, and even not to go to the part that you are trying to work on yourself, that you want to stay in the city,
Of course.
it will become more complicated. On that level, it was very important to bring leaders from the community and other entrepreneurs to start working on the fresh graduates and the new generation to stay in the city. So we start focusing on barriers that pushed all those fresh graduates to leave the city. Between them, there is no available spaces. no capacity building for them, no networking, and to concentrate on those topics to help them to start their startup in the city. Taking into consideration all the big gaps, we are talking about the community in East Jerusalem that is with the highest in Israel on the unemployment, the highest in Israel on school dropout, and the highest in Israel in school shortages. So the outcome of these big issues led the economical situation in East Jerusalem to sink to the ground, and by default that affected the whole situation of all Jerusalem. So from here we start working on how to make the change, how to start working on those at least fresh graduates to stay in the city, to give them all the tools. We are almost 3.5 years working through this NGO, and we can see the success stories of fresh who decided to stay, doing amazing, trying to bring VCs and investment from big sharks to invest of them and to stay in East Jerusalem.
Yeah, I wanted if you can just elaborate on the last point, because I'm not a person of numbers, but I think sometimes when you talk about numbers, it gives the effect. Mm-hmm. So I'll be happy to hear how much investments came from your accelerator startups. How many startups in this program, this very important program? So if you can elaborate a little bit from the beginning on how many startups and investments, I think it will bring a lot of attention.
In the 3 years now, we have already 37 startups started their business in the eastern part of Jerusalem. Last one I heard from him a few days ago that he granted a new investment from Samsung, trying to create a new mobile technique for a new automobile driving car, but this one without maps even. He's working with Stanford, doing amazing, and everything started just from giving the space for Startup Weekend, that investors from Takwin came and saw him and took him and started to invest in him. Sometimes to make those bridges, even between East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem and East Jerusalem and a startup scene inside Israel, it is important, and there was a big lack of those bridges. And now at the moment that we're starting to build them this stage, we can see the results.
Amazing. Is there collaborations between the startups in your accelerator with Israeli, more centralized startups or companies, or it's just something different?
Yes, we are trying to benefit from that the community of East Jerusalem have the full access to the Israeli community. And even when we had an amazing startup who was working on building websites for the Arab sector, and we have the same startup on the Israeli market, so we thought how we can connect them, and at the moment that we connect them, you can see more success stories coming from those companies. All the time for every activity in West Jerusalem or even in Tel Aviv, we are connecting the community, even for the Arab-Israeli community in Nazareth or in Khoury-Kassabru, we are always trying, yes, to keep them connecting because it's part of the success.
Of course. Thank you very much. Very interesting. Professor Khoury, as the Dean in the Hebrew University and also as a special advisor to the President of the University, I'd be more than happy to hear your thoughts regarding your work on how it's affecting social mobility of East Jerusalem. And I'll be happy if you can elaborate more, because you're the expert of, how to say it politely, about the Arab needs of East Jerusalem citizens and how they can assist them, and if you can involve the government in it, what the government can do more to do social mobility for East Jerusalem citizens, according to your research and work.
Okay, so actually it's very connected to what Hani was talking about. And I will talk, you said you are not a person of numbers, so just to start with the numbers, if we are talking about the students from East Jerusalem, like you're looking 5 years ago, at the Hebrew University, there were less than 50 Arab students from East Jerusalem, just generally speaking. This year started at least 250 Arab students from East Jerusalem their first year at the Hebrew University, which is a huge increase of numbers, you know. I wouldn't imagine that if you'd asked me 5 years ago if I would think that 250 students from East Jerusalem will start their first year at the Hebrew University, I would say no, it can't be. So I'm happy that we were able to do that, and actually we were able to do that with the help of the Office of Jerusalem, and mainly Sarit. She hears from us all the time. This is the opportunity to thank you for all your WhatsApp that you answer all the time.
In every hour.
In every hour, exactly.
Important to mention.
And also with the Council of Higher Education, which is also funded by the government. So one of the main projects that we have at the university for East Jerusalem is the preparation year, pre-academic year for students from East Jerusalem, which was like 5 years ago. It was very expensive. It cost $30,000, which like much more than what an Israeli student paid because they were not being funded. Actually, this is one of the changes that
Ran.
spoke about. And then I think the government noticed that if we want them to have an education and also to deal with one of the biggest issues or biggest problems at East Jerusalem, which is the unemployment, when people don't have anything to do, they have a lot of time to do other things. So when they started funding this pre-academic year, at the first year, 4 years ago, we had 70 students. We had 70 students who started their first year, and this year we had 290 students who started the pre-academic year. This means that in the first year there are more than 500 students at one point that are studying at the Hebrew University. And 50%, we made a follow-up after these students, 50% of the students in the pre-academic year started their studies at the Hebrew University, which means this is the way to open the university and the higher education to this population. And if you ask me about the challenges, the population has a lot of challenges, mainly the language challenge, which is the Hebrew. Many of the students from East Jerusalem study, not many, most of them study in Arabic, and some of them study in English, but the Hebrew is very strange to them. So we have also to prepare them for the Hebrew courses. And if we need more money from the government, because the money that we have is not enough.
This is the time to ask.
Exactly. This is why I want
Everything is on record, so.
Yeah, just because actually what we are doing, we are giving, like now I'm Dean, I was able to recruit 10 Arab students from East Jerusalem to study social work. It's the first time at the Hebrew University that 10 Arab students studying social work, but we have to give them special courses because they don't know Hebrew at the same level as even the Arab students who are not from East Jerusalem, like compared to other Arab students, their level of Hebrew is a little bit lower. And these students they want very much to study at the university because mainly they say this is our future. I just made 15 students in the program, a leadership program that is also supported by the office. And they said we came here because we see this is our future. Leave all the political issues aside. We know that there are a lot of political issues around us being at the Hebrew University, but this is our future. If we have a degree from the Hebrew University, we believe we will have more opportunities at the job market. So,
And I have two questions regarding this. So you kind of hinted, but they're going to the Hebrew University and study only in Hebrew.
yes.
So this is also bringing a bridge towards language and connection towards other people or population outside of East Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right. And the second question is, do you do something after? Because we talk about involving them in academia and how it helps them with the prior of their acceptance to the degree. They're doing this gap year, just studying before academia. And also academia, of course, is involving them with other populations. But do you follow up with people when we're going back home in their welfare? How they succeeding? Because I will just give an example. There is a special program of doctors, of internship in Israeli hospitals that bring people from Jordan, from Gaza Strip, from the West Bank, and they go back. And I heard the numbers that over 90% of them still deals with their work that they did, the sub-internship. And of course, it's easier because they're, doctors and doing this internship. But I was wondering if there's a follow-up with the professionals after they finish their degree.
So to start, actually, the process doesn't start when they come to the university. We started this year a new program for students at school, for students at their 10th grade, that they come to the university. We selected out of, Sarit, you don't know the numbers, I think more 300 or 400 students who applied for this program, 80 students to study at the Hebrew University a full day, which prepare them to academic studies, and also give them Hebrew, but not only Hebrew, like social skills and all these things, and they will be at this program for the 3 years. So we believe that this cohort of students, when they come to the university, the studies will be much easier for them. In addition, there are also in East Jerusalem schools who teach the Bagrut, like the Israeli system, so they study more Hebrew than other students. So this, like the process that started before, and then one of the things, actually we don't have this much to follow because the numbers are high now, because all the students who finished before that, they were like very few numbers of students who studied at the university. I believe we will be able to follow them after that to see what's going on with them, but also one of the things that you asked, what we do in addition to helping them in their academic life, we have a lot of collaboration with NGOs who prepare them to the job markets. So we have worked with Socio-Economic and other NGOs.
Which is Israelis.
Yeah, Israelis,
that's
some
amazing.
of them Arab Israelis, some of them Jewish Israelis, and we try to connect them with the job markets in Jerusalem, which is like one of the things that we want them also, not only to have the education, we want them also to work in the job market.
Of course.
So this is like a whole process of collaboration.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. Part of the things to being prepared for such a program is the proper research. I want to connect this to Yamit. As a researcher, I think one of the things that we learned as people on the ground in Europe and in Israel, of course, alongside together with East Jerusalem, which is also need a proper research. I'll be happy to hear more about your research that you provide to NGOs, how they can do better, work better towards their public, but also towards the public sector, how to gain more benefits and more successes.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, we work a lot with different ministries and municipalities, and we identify challenges and then recommend a specific policy measure that they can implement in order to deal with challenges. And when we talk about East Jerusalem, then the challenges are many. Muna just speak about higher education, but when you talk about basic education, you need to know that 40% of the population in East Jerusalem don't have a 12-year schooling certificate. So this is a big barrier for integration in the workforce. So this is an example for one barrier that we've recognized for vocational training. The government use vocational training to integrate Arab women and men in the Israeli workforce, but then we've recognized that most of them don't have this certificate for 12-year schooling, and this is a condition that you have to fulfill if you want to get a professional certificate and work in a professionals. Why this is a problem? Because most of, let's say that the rate of, sorry, that's okay. The participation rate in the labor force for Arab women in East Jerusalem is very low. We're talking about only 27%, which is a huge increase from 2016. It was only 22%. And that means that not all of these women are actually working. These women are looking for jobs. And when you talk about the Arab men in East Jerusalem, then most of them, like 83% of them, do participate in the labor force, but they work in, an unprofessional jobs, and so their salary is very low. So through the research, we try to understand which barriers the municipality and the ministry can address and give them recommendation for policy tools that they can use in order to help them, and the vocational training is one example. Another example for this is we quantify the contribution that would be if we increase the number of Arab women who are going out to work, and only compare it to the Israeli Arab women, not even to the general population of women. If we talked about 27% in 2017, we recommended to compare it to the rate of Arab Israeli women, which is stand for 35%. Then we quantified this contribution and said that if they do join the workforce, then it will increase the income of Jerusalem embodied in income calculation in 500,000 million shekels in 1 year. So this is our job, to try to emphasize the contribution for the government and telling them you should invest here, this is the barrier you should remove in order to help improve the situation of specific population and to deal with different challenges. So this is our contribution.
Great.
to
And tell me, why is it comparing to Arab Israeli women or men? Is it comparable? What's going on in the community in East Jerusalem with
Mona
Arab?
just talked about it a little bit, but there is a huge difference between Arabs in East Jerusalem and Israeli Arabs, because the main reason is that they're actually studying in a different schooling program, education program, not the Israeli program. So they don't even study in Hebrew. So this is a big barrier if you want to work afterward in West Jerusalem or any other country. While Arabs, Israeli Arabs, they do study the Israeli education program, so they do speak Hebrew. So there are huge barriers there. And when we try to compare or even set an objectives for the government and try to help them to set a realistic objective, then we also try to compare it to a population with similar characteristics. So you cannot really compare Arab women from East Jerusalem to Israeli women, which has other benefits besides learning in the Israeli education system. But you can compare it to Arab Israeli women. There they have maybe similar cultural and social characteristics that we can address. So that's why
I will just elaborate with your permission to the non-Israeli participants here that the curriculum in Arab high schools in East Jerusalem is totally different than the Arab communities within Israel. I mean, in the center of Israel, around the triangle of the Arab villages in Israel, which Yamit just mentioned, they study in Hebrew, it's much more connected.
Yeah.
And in East Jerusalem, it's totally different curriculum. This is not the part of the discussion on it, but just to mention it to the record.
And this is also a huge barrier for higher education.
Exactly.
When only 2% of them studying the Bagrut, which is the Israeli exams, then
the Israeli high school diploma, just to mention.
Exactly. So this was a big barrier because universities used to prerequisite this certificate, and if you don't have it, you cannot really integrate in this university. So this is a big difference that universities did.
And by the way, also an Israeli law that you go to university, you need to have this high school diploma, and you also need SATs or other standardized tests, which is sometimes not relevant for some communities in Israel. Totally agree with you. Netta, your thoughts?
Yes, I would like to add a little bit to Yamit's words. I know we said we're not a political panel, but I want to use some of the words that the program we did with the Ministry of Jerusalem and Heritage together said from the government. She said, we cannot ignore the politics, but we mustn't let it freeze us from action. So I think this is what we're trying to talk about with all the numbers, because if you ask me, or to my opinion, what is the source reason of East Jerusalem social gaps, I would say the legal status. The citizenship that do not exist in almost all of East Jerusalem. And other things drive from that. Not being a citizen, not being a...
You should say which is a regional governmental decision, political decision.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a mutual decision, maybe.
I guess, yeah.
Maybe.
I'm not saying about the government in Israel, I'm just saying it is a political decision.
Yeah.
I don't care about size.
But I think that a lot of things drives from that. If you mentioned, for example, that 27% of women participate in the workforce, this is true for the general Arab women society in Israel. In East Jerusalem, we're talking lower numbers. Okay. I want to argue with the researcher.
For Arab Israeli women, we're talking about 35% participation in the workforce, meaning they're not all of them are working. Maybe some of them are looking for a job, maybe some of them are working. But when you're talking about East Jerusalem, in 2016 we talk about 22%. And it's a big difference because I'm talking about the prime ages in the working force, meaning 24 to 65. when you include the ages 15, then the
It's
percentage
even
are
higher.
very low. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Lawyer.
Point.
And I think that also the fact that the education system is not Israeli, so it all drives from that, and you have
Right.
to look at it as a combination.
Yeah, thank you very much. My next question, they told me when I was in the moderator's briefing, it's not a Jerusalem panel if you don't ask about the embassy. So I'll be careful about asking this. I'm kidding, of course, but my next question, is for Ran. I'll be more than happy to hear your thoughts regarding how the declaration and physical moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem affected your work, if at all. And if it's not, I'll be more than happy to hear the international effect or effectiveness that they have on your work as the Director General of the Ministry, since mainly you're dealing with international points of view about Jerusalem. As you said, Jerusalem is always a matter. It's always an issue. Be more than happy to hear about this effect on your work.
Thank you very much. With your permission, I'll start with 2 sentences regarding to what was said here. I think, well, everybody's right, and this is very good. But really to add specifically to what Hani said and Professor Khoury, about everybody, we don't do a favor, the government doesn't do a favor to anyone by trying to bridge the gaps. I mean, it's a mutual, the answer for the question, how will Jerusalem's future look, depends on several things, but one of them is the mutual recognition of the mutual need by both populations, Jews and Arabs in Jerusalem. We need each other. I mean, this is the thing. We don't do a favor to some population by trying to elevate. It's what, that Churchill said once, how did communism manage to equalize level of life? It just brought everybody down. Yes. So we try to do the opposite, but we don't do it as a favor to anyone. It's a mutual need. I won't go into details, but this is this is something that we have to keep in mind. Now, about the embassy, of course, we see great importance to the fact that the American embassy moved to Jerusalem and to the American recognition in Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. But I have to say one thing, and this is very important in my view. Jerusalem doesn't need anyone to recognize it as the capital of Israel, and Jerusalem is not built on the fact that this or that embassy or this or that institute is located in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a very ancient city, quite an important one. I think a great deal of what the world's values, and even international law, by the way, is based on, came out from Jerusalem thousands of years ago. This is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the city of the prophets, it's the city of the temple, it's the city of a very large religion, world religion, monotheistic religion that was born in Jerusalem, which is Christianity, by the way. It's the only monotheistic Jerusalem that was established in Jerusalem. So this is Jerusalem. This is one thing. But, of course, I think we see the fact or the reason why we see great importance to the moving of the embassy and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital city of Israel is that I think we ignored for a long time, we ignored some important facts as of Jerusalem. And it's not because we how shall I put it? It's not because we thought it's a lost battle. I don't think it's a lost battle. And as I said, I don't think it's an essential battle. So never mind if it's lost or not. We just thought it's not important enough. And even when, until 1980, I think, 12 embassies were in Jerusalem. And they moved the city when the government passed the law of Jerusalem in 1980. Just to give you the impression of how Israel sees Jerusalem, when David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, decided to move the government institutions to Jerusalem in 1948, he was asked 2 questions, or he was warned. He was warned and he was asked a question. He was warned that by this, Israel may be kicked out of the UN, only recently admitted to the UN, and may be suspended from the organization if he moves the institutions to Jerusalem. And second, the question was, why don't you, from the other side, he was asked, why don't you set a law of Jerusalem being the capital of Israel? So he answered the question, he said, I don't need to have a law. The law was already set thousands of years ago, and Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, not because I will decide or the modern Israel will decide it is the capital. And as of the warning, he said, if I have to choose between being in Jerusalem and not being in the UN or vice versa, I prefer to be in Jerusalem and being kicked out of the UN. These are the priorities. So in 1980, the government decided for other reasons to bring up the law of Jerusalem, and all the embassies left. And there was not even a single embassy in Jerusalem, and it didn't really matter. So we do think it's important. We do think it's important as part of something larger. I think that as long as people thought, or as long as certain publics had in mind that Jerusalem is under question, I think it affected negatively other issues, international issues, domestic issues, not domestic issues in Israel. I would say the close environment issues between Israel and its neighbors. The minute people understand that Jerusalem is not under question, and this is the importance of what happened in the last year, during the last year. The minute people understand that Jerusalem is not under question, I think it solves other problems. People may say it also puts up some problems, maybe so, but I think it solves more problems than it creates. So if you ask me, this is the main importance. It makes our work easier, by the way, not more difficult. I don't know. I'm not speaking on behalf of my colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They may say that it makes their work harder, but from my experience, the work was, we worked hard, and we have dealt with hurdles anyway, one way or the other. So I'd rather deal with hurdles when the situation is in my favor than the other way around.
Thank you. Part of the things that you just mentioned, the international arena, we're feeling that there's a lot of similarities between now and 1940s. I'm not talking about the Holocaust or World War II, just saying about the Israel perception in the international arena, how they see us. I think there's a lot of similarities right now because of Jerusalem, because of embassies or social government. Part of the declaration of the Trump administration and Trump himself with his special emissaries was he has a solution to the area. You mentioned the area cooperation that for the Middle East, he wants to solve it. With all the respect, he also mentioned that there's a lot of solutions which is economic. So the next question, will be happy to hear Hani and also you, Ron, about how the economic promotion will affect the life in East Jerusalem or in your work with the startup tech community, and of course in the ministry as well. Please.
To start from the point where Ron ended, I think this declaration was very bad for the entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs usually they like to start their life in an incubator. And incubator in the meaning of to live in a peaceful environment without any interference around. And what happened? Just pushed every entrepreneur. And I'm not talking about Arab entrepreneurs or Israeli or Jews or Orthodox. Any entrepreneur, he will see, this is not the right place to swim in. And every time there is any political issues, entrepreneurs prefer to go to the corner, to anywhere else. And this is what we don't want. So what happened affected, yes, negatively the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Jerusalem at all. And being mentioned even in the previous panel that, yes, Jerusalem, it is a poor city. It is a poor city that there are, all the issues are very complicated. And without what being mentioned by Sari, that cooperation and collaboration, there will not be successful stories. So this have to be the core issue to overgap the economical situation. And the economical situation in Jerusalem, it is very, very bad. Because of the high number of unemployment, people just try to find a way or a solution how to move out. because the living in even in East Jerusalem, it is very expensive for them. And for those talented, it was almost an impossible mission for them to stay in Jerusalem and to start their startup in East Jerusalem. Especially that the community in East Jerusalem, they don't have the tools how to start their business. And to give you an example, if a startup wants to start his business in East Jerusalem, he will not any financial support from the Israeli banking system, the Israeli VC system, neither even the Palestinian VC or banking system. So they just fell between the cracks because all the issues on the governmental side were not closed totally for the community in East Jerusalem. So they have no options, and that was one of the most important things that pushed them out of the city. So if he can go anywhere else, he will be successful. He can start his startup, and he can make a good exit in that scene, but not in East Jerusalem. So all those things, we have to bring them to the table to start working. And here we are counting on the governmental side, how to start supporting them, how to start bringing more tools for them to fill this gap and to give them all the needed basic tools to start their business in the city.
Do you find international interests although there is a lot of problems that political affect it, but still, do you find international interests of VCs, investors that want to be involved?
There is, and it's getting more and more. It was complicated till recent years, and all the international bodies didn't know how to support the community in East Jerusalem. It was much easier for them to support the community in the Palestinian territories, but not in East Jerusalem. But now they are coming more and more to East Jerusalem, trying to give the tool. But because the gap is huge, and it doesn't matter how hard the ministry will work, the Jerusalem ministry will work, because there is a gap of education. So you need years to come to change that gap. But yes, more VCs are interested in this community. More international aid are coming. But all of these have to be the small numbers, and more numbers have to come from the governmental side to fill the gap and to make the bridges much easier to build between the two communities.
Thank you. Ron, your thoughts?
Of course, I take into account every word that Hani says, because Hani works out there and he puts the effort trying to make things happen, and he knows what's going on there. Having said that, I would add two things. From our point of view, I don't think we have indicated change but it's from our point of view. Any change in the interest of foreign companies, foreign organizations, or others that are coming to Jerusalem, trying to explore their opportunities there. And they are coming not because they like either Hani or myself. They come for one reason only: when they find it's beneficial for them, when they think it's beneficial for them. That's why Jerusalem has to make better efforts than other cities, than other areas, to prove its value. I think it does that. It doesn't mean at all, because that what Hani said is of course not true, because Hani sees it on the ground. So he sees things, he sees something that we may not see from our point of view. So I take it into account. I would like to add that the work that Hani does or Professor Khoury, they're kind of pioneers. What we try to do is to back them from the base, from beyond, because in the background, because what we're trying to do is to create this environment for Arab pupils that then become students and then become potential high-tech people, or any other. High-tech is not the only profession, but of course we would like Jerusalem to become a high-tech capital, so it's very relevant. What we try to do is to supply the base for that by trying to adjust the curriculum, the Israeli curriculum, in some of the Arab schools in Jerusalem. But as I said before, Jerusalem is stepping now as we speak. Even as we speak, Jerusalem is stepping and marching into the world top level in several aspects of the high-tech arena, such as one of the most developing cities in this regard, or in biomed, I think it's #1 in Israel now, and it means that it's one of the world's leaders. So, but it can. The thing is, and this is what's unique in Jerusalem, both things can live together, as paradoxical as it may hurt. The problems and the opportunities lie together, side by side, and the question is how you deal with it. So, of course, I'm not saying that there was absolutely no reaction to the and maybe to the declaration and to moving the embassy, and Hani probably felt it. But what I'm saying is that we did not see the great tsunami, the horrible tsunami that we were threatened by. If something like that happened, nothing really happened in this regard, not in the aspect of what Hani said. And on the other hand, I said, yes, this is kind of one of the obstacles that Jerusalem has to deal with. Yes, it is a sensitive place. Yes, it is a place, once again, less than before, but still under question, less than before, but still under question or under doubt of several people, of several populations. But the task is to overcome it, and I think that's what we do in the last few years and in years to come. And it does not reduce anything from what Hani just said, because, as I said, he feels it, and we have to move together in order to overcome it.
Thank you. Just to emphasize the point that you mentioned, that high-tech is not the only field. Professor Khoury, the next question is for you. From your work in academia and in research in social welfare, I'd be more than happy to hear your thoughts regarding, is this the answer to promote social welfare in East Jerusalem or high-tech? We will elaborate afterwards with the other panel members, but from your point of view, if we will bring, for example, not 80, but 160 social work students, and then they will go back to use what they've just learned in their degree in their professional life, will it bring a better, society in East Jerusalem or better future for the youngsters?
Actually, it connects me to one comment that I wanted to speak about. We were talking about the barriers that the students from East Jerusalem have, and we were talking about the technical barrier, which is the Hebrew. We should not ignore the belief of these students, also one of the barriers, because we are talking about two populations that are in ongoing conflict. So if we want them to trust immediately the government and the money, they invest in them and they say, oh, now the Israeli government wants us, let's go run to their Limhor. No, so it's an Israeli joke, so I'm sorry. So I think one of the things that should be done is to build on this trust. And this connects me to your question, because if these students finish their degree at the Hebrew University, complete their degree, and then they go to the job market and they will not be accepted because they are Israeli or from East Jerusalem and they are Arabs, we are doing nothing. So we are wasting the money for education because of these students will not go and be part of the job market in Jerusalem and in other parts of Israel. We are just doing nothing in all these efforts that we are doing. So if you ask me also what the government should do, they should help them and they should offer positions for them. Actually, in social work, it's the easiest one, because in social work, many of the people who work in social work are from the north. We spoke about Arabs, like different groups of Arabs. So it's not stable in East Jerusalem, and now there is a huge need for people who are from East Jerusalem who can work all the time and not leave after 2 years when they complete their master's degree. So if you want to work at the Arab sector in East Jerusalem, you will find work. But the question whether these people will be also part of the Jewish or part in Jerusalem and in Israel also. I think if we do that, we will be able to bridge on these gaps that we have between the societies. But otherwise, it's just a waste of money.
Thank you for these remarks. And we will ask two last questions, and we will open the floor to the audience. Just whatever you want to ask our panelists. But as we said, there is no disconnection between policy or political decisions between the actual policy on the ground. And Yamit, the next question is for you. With your research specifically, what do you think are the main points that should change maybe in Israeli or international policy towards, if we want to use the word that describe our panel, towards coexistence of a vivid, positive future?
Okay, so I guess that my comment will be connected to what Hani said and also what Ran mentioned, that the government is trying to do and is doing a lot of things. Like the last resolution, governmental resolution is also an example for goodwill. But I think that sometimes you need to understand what is the right way to suggest the help or to suggest the support that the government offers to this population because of the sensitive political situation. And you can really, when you discussed about economic indicators, you cannot really disconnect it from the political situation. So I guess that you can help and you can do and implement specific policy tools, but you have to adjust them to the population. I mean, if you offer an income support and you have to fill out all the forms in Hebrew, and the population doesn't speak Hebrew, then there is a huge barrier for them to receive these benefits from the government. So some of the tools are already being implemented by the government, but there is a long way to go there.
Thank you very much. Sometimes we forget, especially in Israel, because every social theory in Israel went to the extreme, also economic, like other social theories. But sometimes we forget that left and right are not security measures or theories. It's mainly economic theories. Left social, right is more capitalist. So we need to remember it. And if we are concentrated on our less security level, I think the conversation is much more kept professional, much more open. We will finish the panel in a few, after we have a few questions from the audience. So please, if you have a question, please raise your hand. We'll bring you a microphone. Mention your name and the place that you came from. We'll be happy to answer here. Please.
I'm Canadian.
I don't know if you...
I think...
Yeah.
So, my name is Jen Allen. I'm from Canada, but I live in Berlin. So I'm sure you've heard about all the Israelis who live in Berlin, but also Palestinians who live in Berlin. And there are some, I won't name all the cooperations, but it goes from an Israeli and a Palestinian living together in a how do you say, one apartment to a restaurant like Hanan, which is Israeli Palestinian, is working together. So this is a really crazy idea, but what would happen if you take people, like let's say 100 people from East and West, and take them to a more neutral place? Maybe Berlin is not so neutral, but someplace like Canada. You know, there are a lot of American universities that opened up branches in Berlin, and to take 100 people from both sides and that they study in a more neutral place, in a neutral language, like English maybe, and that would make relationships between them. It would make a kind of mentorship situation, and all the political problems are kind of removed because the geographics have been removed. The actual place is not there, it's just the people. So they get international experience as well. They also meet people in a new... I don't know if it's economically feasible, but you know, instead of financing all the things to get around so many different barriers, and I found this panel so inspiring too, so I have to thank you too. But it just seems like everybody has barriers from the other people, and the one way to get rid of them is to take everyone to another place. You know, but I don't know if but it's not a crazy idea. Like there's all sorts of universities have a how do you say it, Zweigstelle? Yeah, or they've set up their actual university campus in Berlin. You know, they all have a campus now in Berlin. So I think for Israelis it's maybe problematic, but not anymore, because there are, I don't know, more than 25,000, 30,000 Israelis living in Berlin now. So to pick another place that's neutral, a neutral language, a neutral place, they don't have problems of transferring. They get also in a community where there are other startups moving in. They have automatically international connections. and to finance, like, let's say 100 students for a degree, or let's say a program, just some kind of startup initiative for 2 years, instead of like going around the law, trying to arguing with everybody. I don't know. It's just a proposal.
Thank you. Mona?
Okay. One of the things that I want to tell you, we have, Sarit mentioned, at the Hebrew University now, one of the main things that we have international courses. So we have now, we just had a course in Germany and participated in that, students, Arab and Jewish students from the Hebrew University, and they came to Berlin to talk about diversity. So it's a great idea, but I don't think that the solution in Israel is related by persons. We think that, I believe, and I know many people think the same, that the problem is not between people this much. There is a higher problem or higher discussion that should be taken, and it's like at the government level. But when we talk about students, actually at universities, this is the first opportunity that Jewish and Arab students meet, because the education system in Israel is segregated. So we are trying to do what you did with the initiative that I mentioned at the beginning with the Israeli Hope. We don't need to send them out. We do that at the university. I myself had a course like that, which was a Jewish and Arab student participated, and they talk about everything, political issues, everything was on the table, and it was great because people can talk and discuss. And I believe here on the table, I'm sure we don't have the same political views, and we are very different, and we can sit here and discuss many things and be like a good friends. And this is one of the main things that we see at the Hebrew, at universities in Israel, mainly in Jerusalem, which is like more also political issues raised. But I believe the solution in Israel is a little bit higher. Like the problem is at higher levels in Israel, and I think it should be solved in higher levels also as well.
I think there's also a need to mention there is international programs that initiated in American universities, such as Harvard and Stanford, that has a fellowship that bring Palestinians and Israelis outside of Israel. And not only because I'm Israeli, but I think English is better and easier for Israelis to learn than German. But I'm saying in general, I think the point that you raise is very important. And sometimes when you disconnect from the ground, although it's mainly, it's a ground decision and a ground conflict. So if you disconnect it, it is important to do it outside. But as Mona said, it has to have a connection, a direct connection back home.
It would be that people go and come back again. I mean, I've just seen, I'm sorry, but I've had lots of, they won't come back, I know. Everybody seems to be able to get along in Berlin, you just see this on an everyday basis. It's extremely inspiring. And I see all the goodwill that you have on this panel too, and I can hear the differences behind it, but it's really everybody wants to do the good thing, and the problems are all stemming from the legal systems and structures in that place. So it's to use a utopian, a non-place, and that people maybe would have to agree to go back and work there for 5 years if they are paid, for example, their student fees for studying in the campus in Toronto or something.
Yeah, so those are all possibilities, and thank you very much for this. We're open for a few more questions if there is. Please, Hani.
To add a point, yes, we have these programs, and it's working amazing to send Israelis and Palestinians. And especially in the entrepreneurship, and the results are amazing for them, that they are coming back and making joint venture companies. But if we are talking about Jerusalem and the community in Jerusalem, I think you can feel the spirit in Jerusalem just in walking in the streets. Put the politicians aside. If there is no politicians in this world, the amazing peace, you will find it in Jerusalem streets. It is there. It is the only place that you don't feel the difference between Muslim, Christian, Jews, or anyone else. And all of the people living in Jerusalem, you can feel the harmony that they are connecting to each other. Unfortunately, all our problems related to the politicians. So let's just pray to keep them away from us. But between the people, yes, you can feel that, and there is no need to send them anywhere else. Anyone from anywhere in the West world, just to come to Jerusalem, and he will feel different.
Well, you know that just compared to what Warren said, Churchill said also that democracy is good for politicians, but it's not always good for the people. So it is. Another question, please, from the audience before we'll finish this wonderful panel. Sarit, everybody's pointing at you. No, okay, now, please.
Hello, I'm Dominikus, also from Berlin. I have a question regarding the parents. I think how hard is it to convince parents to do they push like from East Jerusalem? Do they want to push their children to higher education, or how are they reluctant, or what kind of is their own story that they are now in the conflict of what to do? That's my question. Yeah,
It's a good one.
The parents are very supportive. When I said we have this pre-academic year, when the students come, many of them come with their parents to help them. And now we have, because they are very young, these students, next week we are having a Parents' Day, which is very strange at the university. But we noticed that these students still need the support of their families, and they wouldn't come if their families don't support them to come to the university. And as I said, they believe this is the opportunity of their children to go to the job market, to have a work and decent work, because like if you say they are working like 35% or 25% of women work, I'm not sure they work according to what they are qualified. Many of them
Out of certificate. This is
exactly.
the number.
This
They
is
are
like
out of certificate.
exactly out of certificate, which means that many of them can work in other positions if they were graduated from an Israeli university. But unfortunately, because their certificate is from another university, many of them can't work. And this way the numbers are misleading, because they can be also working in cleaning, and they are counted as working while they can be teachers, So I believe that the opportunities, this will give them opportunity, and parents want that for their kids.
Just to add about what Muna just mentioned, we do see that a lot of Arab women works as a teachers, but we also noticed there is a high positive correlation between education level and participation in the labor force with Arab women. So there you can find an educated woman would work, maybe she would be a teacher, and she could be something that could supply her a much higher income, but she chose to be a teacher. But when we talk about Arab men, then we can see that there is no correlation between education and employment. I mean, there you can find someone that has a second degree, but he will work in a construction site instead of another high salary position.
I also like to add, I think every parent wants to have his children better life opportunities. And once you start thinking creatively and you manage to bypass the political issues, like the university did, by accepting students without the Israeli high school diploma, but the Tawjih diploma, and giving them a preparatory year of Hebrew and all the stuff they need, then you take the sting out, So there's no need for the parents to object for higher education as a social mobility leverage. And this is why you see a strengthening trend of East Jerusalemites going to university.
Thank you. Without further ado, we need to finish this wonderful panel. I think the audience, especially me, as a listener, learned a lot. I know I have listened carefully to what you said, and as the question came and said, there is a lot behind it. So there always is, but it depends how we say it and how we mention it. So thank you very much. We'll be happy to see you soon. Thank you.